A pleasure to and an honor to be invited to share some of the things I've learned and been taught over the past mainly 10 years, maybe a dozen, and a lot of the other things I've learned through my life experience. So I'll say, guess what? Norman Leech and Squatchy Chat. Tritlet Muskan, Statliam Scan, Amati at Han Junus Anna. So I say hello, or we're here together, friends and relatives. And it's my name is Norm Leech, and I'm from Tlietlet of the St'át'imc Nation. And it's very good to see you all here today. And I've been asked to speak about truth and reconciliation. And of course, that comes out of the experience of Indigenous people in so-called Canada, and especially in British Columbia. Like the first explorer through here was Simon Fraser, and this is where my ancestors have lived for more than 10,000 years. But Simon Fraser came through in 1808, which is barely 200 years ago. And so for 10,000 years, we managed everything, the forests, the salmon, the river, the mountain, everything. And again, this goes for Indigenous people across the continent. So having control and responsibility for everything for 10,000 years, and it was pretty good. In fact, it was fantastic. The forests were the biggest on the planet. The salmon runs were the biggest on the planet. The caribou herds, the buffalo herds, everything was beyond the imagination of the explorers when they arrived, because of the good work of the people, because of our understanding of what it means to be human beings on this planet, which is very different from the explorers, their understanding of what it means. And so the name of the day is Truth and Reconciliation. But from our experience, it hasn't been a lot about the truth because Canada's history or version of the history is very different from ours. So I've spent a dozen years understanding the history because before I worked at the neighborhood house, I worked at the Aboriginal Community Policing Center. And we worked with the urban Indigenous community in the downtown East Side, Vancouver. And there's 70,000 Indigenous people living in the greater Vancouver area. And most of them aren't from here. They're from everywhere else. So they're far from home and far from community and far from their culture and even further from their ancestors, their ancestral ways. And so we've been trying to adapt to these new ways. And we've tried, and we've tried, and we've tried, and we've tried, and they still don't work for us. And as far as we can see, they don't work for hardly anybody anymore. So, in trying to help the people, especially the people in downtown East Side Vancouver, and where I spent many years, we've drawn on the things that work. And the techniques that have worked best for us are land-based and reconnecting with culture, with community, with ancestors, with the land. And so many have heard of Dr. Gabor Mate, who says that the solution to trauma is connection, and the source of trauma is disconnection. And of course, he learned all that from working in the downtown East Side with us. So this is not new to us. We understand it and we know that it works. But it's maybe rooted in, you may have heard Indigenous people use the term all my relations. That means all my friends and relatives. But it applies to way more than just people. The colonized worldview of friends and relatives only applies to people generally, maybe pets. But we know that, to me, it means all my relationships with everything, everywhere. every when. So that also informs, someone noticed my acronym or my pronouns are we, us. And that is a reflection of that. That is an understanding that we are part of. We are part of our family. We're part of our community. We're part of this circle. We're part of the land. We're part of this earth. We're part of this solar system. We are part of this universe. We are not separate from any of it. And that is a fundamental difference between a colonized worldview and an uncolonized worldview. Colonized worldview starts with the individual. I think, therefore I am. That each of us is separate. And ultimately, each of us is alone in here. I am in here. Everything else is not I. And that means I am alone in here. And you are all alone in there. And in that universe, everyone is alone. And if you consider the hardest times of your life, the greatest challenges you've faced, the scariest times, and if you had to face those alone, they are much, much harder. But if you are with and beside and part of, then we can face just about anything. So that is a fundamental difference that I don't know that can be reconciled. Because this world view that has been imposed on us does not make sense to us. Because it is way out of balance. And maybe that's one thing we can all agree on, that this world is out of balance. And our understanding of our role here as human beings is to notice when things are out of balance, to notice that someone is hurting, that someone needs help, that the forest, the salmon need help. They're getting out of balance. And then we've also received these many other gifts to restore and maintain the balance of all things. So we, and I try to introduce people to this idea through the land acknowledgement that I do, where I acknowledge the land itself first, because the land was here first. And the land was here for billions of years before humans were here. And we never considered the land as our property. The land is actually our relative. She's our ancestor. She's our greatest grandmother. And she has gifted us everything that we've ever eaten or drank or used as medicine or shelter has been a gift from her to our ancestors and us forever. So when someone gifts you everything you ever needed forever, that's the definition of love. So we know in every cell and molecule of our bodies that we are loved. And that's almost what it means to be born a human on this planet. You must be loved because you get to be a human being on Earth. And it's what I called it, the lottery win of the universe, because you get that body, you get that mind, you get that heart, you get the opportunity to experience all these things of being a human being on this planet. This is the greatest planet that we know of. And so you get the opportunity to experience as much of it as you can. The food, the people, the friendship, the love, the laughter, the joy, the pleasure. Yes, even the grief and the sadness and the heartache and the fear. But what a journey we get. And we get it for a little bit of time. And as far as we understand, all we're really supposed to do is take care of the place. But someone, somehow, and we did for thousands of years. And we understood that we have the gifts of intellect, of creativity, of our many, many, many senses to notice the imbalance. And then also have the additional gifts of being able to use those gifts of dexterity, of ingenuity, of mobility, of to to restore and maintain the balance of all things, not just people, everything, the salmon, the river, the mountain, the trees. So that's what makes sense to us. But we've had to survive, and survival was not always a given for us. The diseases that came with colonization and exploration wiped out probably somewhere between 80 and 99% of the population without ever seeing an explorer, because those diseases, those pathogens, and there were dozens, were lethal and fatal to us. We had zero immunity to any of them. The cold killed us, the flu killed us. And we were probably this close to extinction. But a few survived. And they must have been amazing to survive all that. And so they did. And they survived, and they decided to stay when it probably looked like the Creator was telling them it's time for you to get out of the way. Because that's probably what it must have felt like, to feel like this is not going well. 400 years of death and dislocation and desperation and laws and residential schools and reserves. But those few survived, and they must have been pretty tough and smart and fast and maybe even mean to survive all that. But I have to be grateful for their perseverance, because every Indigenous person alive today is descended from them. So in fact, we are selected for survival. So we have proven that we can survive pretty much anything. And now all we have to do is heal it. And we're proving we can do that too. And the methods that work best for us actually work best for everybody, because we are not the first people to be colonized on this planet. We're more like closer to the last. And so I remind everybody that you also have a family history that goes back somewhere, many generations, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 30, where you have ancestors who lived in one place for more than 1,000 years. And they had a relationship with that land, where they loved that land. And they knew everything about that land, and they cared for that land for thousands of years. And they knew that that land must love them too, because it gave them everything that they ever needed or wanted. But then something happened along the way to force your ancestors to have to leave those lands. And what was that? Was that war? Was it pandemic? Was it famine? Was it colonization? And was that traumatic for your ancestors to be separated from their original grandmother? And have you been feeling that disconnection, that sense of loss, that emptiness of not understanding your connection to your original places? And that's almost the definition of colonization, is to separate the original people from their original land. But we're learning how to heal it. And so it's working. We're doing the work. We're teaching other people how to change their relationship with trauma. And through that, you can change your relationship with everything, with each other, with the land, with your ancestors, with the universe. So if it boils down to two words, an uncolonized or an indigenous way of being, I would characterize it as, in its simplest forms, it's to listen and to help. But that's not enough, because to listen implies that it's just with your ears. And to help, most people equate that to helping each other. but it goes beyond. So it's a better word is notice, to notice imbalance, to notice something is out of sync, out of balance. And we have many, many senses to do that. And more than just the five that colonized systems try to convince you that you only have five senses, but we have way more. And one of them is a sense of connection. So to notice, how are things? How is your body in there? How stressed are you? How much pressure is now being applied? How much trauma is coming at us constantly from the world? And then, so those are one of the gifts that we've received, the many ways of noticing and the many, many senses, the sense of time, sense of direction, sense of justice, sense of humor, sense of connection. And there are many more. So those are some of our greatest gifts we've received as humans. And the other gifts are our ability to help. But to help, it's much more than just help, it's transform. We have the gifts of transformation to transform our way of thinking, to transform our perspective, to transform the world around us. We have the ability to improve things or make it worse. And that's the gifts that we have, to notice the imbalance and to transform the balance back towards balance, or to transform the imbalance. And this modern world is so far out of balance. The wealth inequity, the racism, the discrimination, the the many isms of Islamophobia, of the religious divisions, the separations, the isolations, the conflicts. So, to go beyond listen and help, to notice and transform. And that describes the lives that I see the elders at home living without speaking of it that way. Because in my trying to make sense of what is the culture of the conflict of culture that leads to Indigenous people leading every negative social health indicator measured in this country. Why is it that way? It's because of the difference in worldview. And I don't know that they can be reconciled. But I also understand that they're affecting everybody now, that they don't serve hardly anybody in a good way anymore. These rules that have been created, these systems that have been created, these institutions that don't seem to be able to change. So, I promote the idea of notice and transform. And that allows us to change our relationship with trauma. And through that, understand that it's not ours. And also have ways of setting it down so that we don't have to carry it around and it doesn't stay in our bodies. Each of us carries our stress and our tension and our pressures and our fears and our griefs in our body. And you probably have an idea where in your body you store it, whether it's in your shoulders and neck, your chest, your throat, your jaw, your lower back, in your gut. And we pick it up all the time, every day, because it helps. It helps our families, it helps our friends, it helps our clients, it helps our colleagues. And so we take a little bit because it's our nature, because we want to help. And so we do, and it does help. But did anyone ever teach you how to set it down? No, but we know how. And so we're healing all those things. And probably the biggest thing we have to learn to heal is the traumas of colonization. But you have them too. Yours just started further back and further away. And so the more we notice what works for us and then notice that it also works for the people who are our allies and our friends and our supporters, then we understand that it's the shared birthright of being humans on Earth that can actually connect us and help us share purpose and to restore the balance of all things on this planet. And to share what we've learned over 10,000 years, how to live in balance with the land. And hopefully, in time, before this Earth says, well, we have had enough and we are going to cause a change and we're going to start again. Because the Earth did fine for billions of years without us. And in another 10,000 years, the Earth will be fine again. Either because we figured it out and we changed our ways and we learned how to live in balance on this planet, or we didn't and we're gone and proved that we never deserved the shot in the first place. So to me, it's kind of straightforward and simple. I get asked to speak to many events, and one of them was my Muslim brothers invited me to speak at a Earth Day that day was titled "Saving Our Planet," and I thought, okay, that's even for humans, that's pretty arrogant, and humans are the most arrogant creature in the universe. Uh, so we're saving whose planet? Oh, our planet. Okay, so we've claimed ownership of this planet. It's like fleas owning a dog, and we're going to save it from who? Oh, from ourselves. And I said, actually, this day, this event should be called Saving Our Asses, because that's what we're trying to do uh, from ourselves. But I'm just thrilled to have the conversation, to be invited to share a little bit of what I've learned. There's so much more, but hopefully that's enough to make this a beginning and not an end. Because the conversation requires continual learning and sharing. And that's what these are, is an opportunity to begin. So I think hopefully that's gives you a little bit of where I come from and how I view things, and an invitation to continue the conversation beyond today. So thank you for inviting me. Happy to share.